Hi, my name is Ashley Bugby, and this is my EDL 954 case study for district finance. To begin with, I'm going to summarize the scenario of what this community and schools are facing. So this is Oakwood Community. I'm going to get a little bit more into demographics on the next couple of slides, but overall it described this district as a small, connected, supportive community. Some of those examples were that the teachers got together and fundraised for a student who needed a bone marrow transplant. All of the patrons come and support athletics and other events. There's a lot of members that are a part of the PTO. So overall, this is a very interconnected community. The teachers and their families are a part and very connected throughout the community as well. So that's really important to remember as we go through all of this. And it reminds me a lot of the community and the small rural schools that are located all over Kansas as well. So unfortunately, this is kind of a nightmare situation that you hope you never run into, but it has happened in the past. And there's been an unexpected state budget cut. They did not financially end up where they needed, so you're not going to get some of the money that was originally allocated for the school. Because of that, the superintendent appointed a committee. This committee was made up of the superintendent, teacher representatives from every school, 2 district office staff, and then also the PTO president. They got together, looked at all of this data, really pored over it, spent time doing this, and came out with some proposed changes in the projected budget for the schools so that they could move forward. And those changes were to cut funding for the after-school athletics and the elementary music programs, and that the families must pay a fee for transportation. So the families had not paid a fee. It's really important as a part of this too, is that this was a big deal. They called it, the sacred cow for this community, is that their kids did not have to pay to be transported. So that's also something important to remember, because that's when emotions can rise to the top as well. So the committee looked at this, and these were the proposals that they took to the board meeting. And that board meeting, 100+ patrons attended the board meeting. The parents had concerns over financial stress for the increase in the cost for transportation. This is a very blue-collar community. The father of the student who they had raised the money for stood up and, described that this would be a financial burden for all of them. And he also knew that the teachers were supposed to get a 5% raise. So kind of brought that up, saying, well, why can't we take that away instead of making the cost go towards us and having to pay for transportation? Some of the other members that were there, they said that docents or volunteers for the music program might be a way to continue with that. And the athletic coaches said that collecting fees from parents for athletics could be a way to continue to fund their programs. Overall, this board meeting sounded pretty contentious and angry, and that a lot of emotions were coming out. To look at some of the legal or ethical issues that could come from this, if Oakwood was in Kansas, which we're not exactly sure of, but Kansas provides some funding for transportation of students that are 2.5 miles away from their school building out to district lines, and even that is going to continue to change. We could go all the way into other districts to pick up schools with our buses or vans, things like that in the future. We could park across from somebody else's elementary school and pick up students. Don't know about the ethical issues of that, not that we want to do that to our neighboring districts, but we're going to be allowed to. And also that the teacher negotiated agreement, the 5% increase was a negotiated increase. And so the changes to that agreement have to be approved by the board and by the teacher negotiating body. So there could be some legal issues coming up if they try to take that away. And there's also ethical sides to this, because if I'm a teacher who works really hard and is even fundraising for students in my community, and they promised me a 5% cost of living increase, and then we're going to take it away, that would really damage teacher morale as well. So this is a very hard situation, and I think ethically you've got to be really careful to make sure that you are keeping your staff and community's feelings in mind as much as possible as well. So to look a little bit more into what is happening, the school district's families are upset by proposed budget solutions that are being presented to the school board that address an unexpected state budget shortfall. To look a little bit more into the facts and the specifics of what is happening in this scenario, the people or the stakeholders that this is going to affect the most, I think, number one, you always have to think of the students first. So there are actually 6,000 students within the Oakwood School District. This will also affect teachers who were promised a 5% cost of living increase. There's always administrators, building leaders that are a part of this as well. The budget committee, which was again made up of the 2 district office staff, teacher representatives, and the PTO president. This, of course, will affect the Board of Education because in the long run, they're the ones who are going to approve or disapprove of the budget cuts or the recommendations that are coming from the committee. This affects the parent-teacher organization and, of course, the community stakeholders that include parents and guardians and other patrons. And they are the ones that are angry with the proposed budget solutions because of what that could affect as far as money that they have to pay or programs that their students aren't going to be a part of anymore. So this place, Oakwood, is a rural Midwest town that is very blue collar. There's 6,000 students, and that is broken into a high school, a middle school, and 2 elementary schools. So this sounds very similar to a lot of school districts within Kansas. So, and some of the scenario itself sounded very familiar to me as well. I think it's important to remember with stakeholders and with people that no matter what, there is communication is really important. So you know that those teachers that were on that committee probably went back and told their friends about things they were discussing, and that's probably how a lot of this information got out. So I question when they went to the board meeting so angry if they understood some of the different aspects of it and if a little more communication wouldn't have been possibly good, but that's something that we need to find out too. So programs that this is affecting, obviously transportation, which again has kind of been the sacred cow, and that is something that has never been paid for in this district by patrons themselves, after school athletics, and then also the elementary music programs. Next, we're going to prioritize some of the information and then also think about things that are kind of unknowns in this situation that would be really vital for me to know to be able to completely work through this scenario to have the best outcome as possible. So first of all, you always have to think of the repercussions that stakeholders are going to have from the conflict that is happening. So again, you need to think of students first, teachers, families, and the community overall. So really being able to sit down and how is making or families pay for transportation affecting all of these categories? How is cutting those programs affecting students, teachers, families, and community? So always something that should come to the forefront when you're thinking through these scenarios. And have all of the relevant stakeholders been consulted? I thought it was interesting that they did not have it wasn't listed at least, that there was building administrators that were on that committee going through the budget stuff. I would really think that it would be beneficial to add some building administrators because they're going to be the ones who know about programs, maybe some spending that could be taken care of, that the teacher representatives from the buildings are great, but I also think you should add administrators there. There should probably be a couple of boards of education members on the committee as well. The more people involved, granted, you don't want to have a ton of people, but the more representatives that you have from the different stakeholder groups, the more understanding that you're going to build with why is this what we're proposing to do. And I also think that maybe an opportunity was missed. It seemed like by the time they got to the Board of Education meeting, there was a lot of anger and contention built up because of what the public was hearing. And so maybe holding a public forum before that would have been a good option to hear their opinions instead of it necessarily just happening at that meeting. And being able to, again, communicate and create an understanding of situations is always important when thinking about relationships with stakeholders. Some of the information that I think would be needed for me to know more about this is obviously budget specifics. What real shortfalls are we seeing, and what kind of programs or projects could maybe be put on hold? that we could do this. So I would want to know also committee meeting details. What information did they use for consideration? What data did they have that they looked through and proposed? And how did this committee communicate their decisions? I can imagine in a small community, again, I think I said it a little bit earlier, these teachers that are a part of it probably go home, they're in a social situation, maybe they're hanging out with friends and they're chatting about it. And unfortunately, that can start a wildfire through a community. If somebody doesn't understand why they might be adding a transportation cost to possibly save other things, it would be important. And I would want to know more about the district transportation specifics. So kind of like the Kansas statute that maybe we have to provide busing for students that are 2.5 miles and out. If we were busing kids that were closer than that, maybe that could be something that now their parents have to find a way to get them to school. So maybe that would reduce some of the transportation costs themselves. So those are some of the things, the information that I think would be needed for me to be more specific about how I would address these concerns. Next, developing some options. There's 4 that I came up with. Again, I think to develop more specifically, I would need more specifics about the budget problem itself. Option 1, no change. Option 2, accepted proposed budget cuts. Option 3, rescind the teacher salary increase. And then option 4, send the decision back to the committee. We are going to look through all of these options now. So if we just didn't do anything, we carried on as is, kind of ignored the fact that we're having a budget cut, obviously it would be easy. It's going to lessen animosity from both sides, from the staff and faculty side, and then from the parent community side. It's going to appease everybody, maintain the teacher morale, but of course it does not address the problem that is going to be coming, and you will not be able to meet the student needs. At some point in the year, you're not going to have the money you need to give the students the resources that they need. And option 2 is if the committee proposed their budget cuts and the Board of Education just went ahead and passed them. This addresses the budget shortfalls quickly. All that work you've done is not for nothing. They maintain that pay increase for teachers, which is, again, maintains teacher morale. The cons obviously would alienate the stakeholders because they're pretty passionate about the issues that they see before them. And you would be losing beneficial programs and also some staff positions as a part of that as well. Option 3 would be to rescind the teacher pay increase. So the community members threw out there the fact that the teachers were getting a 5% increase, and kind of alluded to the fact that this could be something maybe that would address the budget shortfalls. So the pros of this, it's going to appease those angry community members, and it could address the budget shortfalls, again, without complete information. I'm unsure if that actually would address everything. And of course, the cons are teacher morale. If it's something that you're promised, especially in a community that you are so intertwined with, this could really affect teacher morale. Breaking an agreed upon negotiated agreement, and it's going to create a problem with the culture and the climate of the school building itself. And I think this could create a pretty deep community conflict as well, if these teachers and their families are as interconnected as it is described. The final option that I've developed is to send the decision back to the committee. And the pros is that this could build communication and understanding across the stakeholder groups, and it could also create a more representative committee. So including some other stakeholders might be important when it comes to building that understanding that the community needs. The cons of this are possible time concerns. So if you have to go back to a committee and meet with them, it's something that unfortunately these decisions might need to be expedited because of the budget shortfalls that are coming. And so sending it back to a committee is going to take more time, and it's going to be frustrating to committee members because they've already invested time looking at data and developing these decisions anyway. And no matter what, you're still going to have to make those difficult decisions. Somebody's going to be angry or hurt or upset because that's what happens in situations like this. And also, the public really does not have a good understanding of school budgets. They're complicated. And so, to be able to explain these things to the community, again, you're going to have some animosity and some frustration there no matter what. If I'm going to choose which one I would follow through with, that would be to send the decision back to the committee. Number one, I don't know enough personally, obviously, about the school district and the budget or the budget shortfalls that are coming. So to be able to be more specific about it is kind of difficult at this point. But I think that this is the best option to maintain community relationships and create an understanding of district and school resource planning, along with what school budget issues are, and definitely having the best options for addressing the budget shortfalls. As far as implementing, sending this back to the committee, it's really important to know again that there's going to be heightened emotions, and it's probably going to be frustrating to those people that were already on the committee because they spent their time and energy coming up with these decisions and they understand the data and disaggregated it to come up with the best options. But hopefully that this will lessen some of that animosity that's out there if you can create a more representative stakeholder groups. So number one, I think you really need to include more administration from every building. They are the ones that are going to understand the programs and the budget for those programs within their schools. Maybe there's something specific within their school that we can do to lessen a budget for the year instead of doing away with some of these programs. You need to include teacher association representatives, so they're negotiators, because it was brought on the table by the community. They brought up the fact that the teachers were getting a 5% pay increase. As a superintendent, that's something that I want to vitally protect because number one, it was already negotiated and agreed upon. And number two, it's going to really, really hurt teacher morale if you take that away. I think that you never want to cut salaries if at all possible. Board of Education members should be included, and additional, possibly parent-teacher organization members too. Again, we don't want the group to be too big, but in this situation, creating a base of understanding and foreknowledge of budgets and how they work and why you came to the decisions you came to is important for those people to then be able to go out and share this with stakeholder groups as well. When I'm meeting with the committee, some of the information that I think is important to consider when you're making budget cuts across the board, anytime you have to do budget cuts, identifying programs that have the lowest effect on student learning, because again, this needs to be student-centered. What areas have low participation and high expenditures? So maybe there is athletics that have a high expenditure. Maybe that's why they made that decision to begin with, and there's low participation in it. Something to always consider is, can you reduce actual staffing positions, first of all, to attrition? So if somebody is leaving, is there any way to do away with that position or split those responsibilities up? Also, again, cutting staffing or cutting their salary is not something you ever want to do. You don't want to have to let go of people. That's why attrition would be the best option. But is there some classified positions that you could do away with if at all possible? That's not something, would not be one of my first choices, but that might be an option too. And is there any way to cut transportation costs in another way? So if maybe, like we said in Kansas, if we were busing students that were 2.5 miles and below, maybe we could just cut that out and parents would have to find a way to get their kids to school. So there are some options and some information to consider working with that committee again. I think that it would also be important to survey community members, so that committee could come up with decisions or ideas and survey community members. I also think that because it's such an impassioned thing, it would be important to hold a public forum if at all possible. Communicate with the public, provide them clear information, try to allow productive discussion, and make sure that everything is student-centered. You know, parents are passionate because these are their kids, obviously. So they're going to be, you want to try and create an atmosphere that it's like a good communication. So being able to discuss something without getting anger heightened or things like that. And a public forum might allow that better than a board meeting would. Possible consequences that could come of this, obviously animosity, a culture and climate decline, and that is not just in the school building. Because it's a rural and close community, this could affect the whole community and probably will in one way or another, especially when you have staff that are so interconnected with community members as well. Teacher morale could decline, and obviously sending it back to a committee could delay making decisions and possibly be a detriment to the budget overall. And finally, on my implementation, plan B and continuous needs. So things that I would continue with, looking for alternative funding and grants. So it was mentioned that maybe docents could be a part of the music program, volunteers could keep it going. So that's an absolute option that you could do. Continuing to meet with building administrators and other committee members throughout the year to see, as you go throughout the year, you might be able to figure out other things that you can cut cost in. I think it's important as a district is to develop a cash balance that you carry from year to year for emergency purposes, for these things, for the things that you're just not expecting. And this, could maybe soften the blow of some of this stuff as well. And as always, finding ways to communicate with stakeholders and then also state legislatures, especially when it comes to state funding. Thank you.